2025 has been a whirlwind for hip hop, hasn't it? I mean, seriously, we got comeback albums from Chance the Rapper with the album Starline, which by the way is super fire. We got Gunna's last project on YSL called The Last One. I mean, we even got the Clips coming back from a 15-year hiatus and dropping Let God Sort 'Em Out. And what about guys like Freddie Gibbs, who typically doesn't get talked about? He linked up with The Alchemist and they dropped Alfredo 2, which was a banger as well. But what if I told you that some of the albums that dropped this year were a tad bit overrated? Yeah, come a little closer. Yeah, you're probably not gonna like some of these on this list. So look, I'm gonna make my argument in a few, so stick around for the logic in my argument. For some of the folks in the back who disagree, y'all gotta make sure to chime in the comments, but we're gonna get into it in a few. By the way, guys, my name is Uche and I make videos like this every single week, or at least I'm planning to. So if you like videos like this, hit that like button. If you wanna see me elevate and you wanna see my channel grow, hit that subscribe button for your boy. Oh, and make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter because I always forget somehow at UCHAYVA to keep up with everything that I typically rant about. All right, guys, now let's get into this. Okay. Let's talk about my most overrated hip hop albums of 2025 list. But before we do, quick disclaimer, this is my list. Just like the last list, this is my list. So I know I'm gonna list a couple of albums that are on your favorite albums list, but guess what? Hey, much power to you. This is my list. Gotta keep saying that because, yo, you could argue that albums like Playboi Carti's Music album, or I Am Music if you will, or even Drake and Party Next Door, Some Sexy Songs for You, or even Cardi B, I Am the Drama, could arguably be put on a most overrated albums list. But for me, I actually think those albums were pretty dope. I mean, they sold pretty well. I thought they each had hits that were well received by the culture. I know people are detractors of each one of these artists, but for me, these are just some examples of artists and albums that to me would probably be on the most overrated list, but not necessarily on mine. For me, we got to talk about expectations, cultural anointment, right? Unrealistic pressure being put on folks that they weren't able to meet or that people overinflated for whatever reason. And so that's sort of my barometer when it comes to overrated. Y'all leave your thoughts on what overrated means in the comments as it relates to albums, but let's get beyond the dictionary and let's get to the music. Now, this list is in no particular order, but first we gotta talk about Lil Baby's album called Wham, also known as Who Hard Is Me. And this project released on January 3rd, 2025. It sold 140K first week album units. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 charts. And I mean, it was a 15-track album. It had features from Young Thug, Future, Glorilla, Travis Scott. This album was touted as the biggest thing to hit 2025. At least we thought so going into the new year. But in all actuality, was it? It did both songs like Dumb, Dumb and Dumber featuring Young Thug and Future, which actually showed this was the first official verse from Thug after the 2022 to 2024 YSL Rico trial. Listen, y'all know that was a highly covered moment for hip hop, but that was supposed to be a big verse. And I think Thug did turn up, but he could have did a little better in my opinion. This album also had Stuff featuring Travis Scott, also Outfit featuring 21 Savage and a slew of other singles. But in all actuality, when you think about it, beyond the hype, beyond the promises that Lil Baby had for us saying that he was gonna drop a second album called Dominique, which by the way never actually released this year.
Do you have a release date in mind? I know we said February.
Yeah, like end of February for sure. I don't have an exact release date, but end of February.
And he only recently, after pushing it back a ton of times, finally released the Leaks project. I gotta ask you guys, is this album anything more than generic baby music? Like seriously, I mean, do we really get any innovative moments on this project? Or is this more of the same from Lil Baby that to me, in my opinion, doesn't quite set the standard anymore for rap music? Like I just genuinely feel like this album was highly overrated and it just didn't have a lot of standout moments for me. And so, hey, you may have loved this project, but for me, I gotta throw this one at #1 on my list to highlight for you guys. Next, oh man, this one's gonna pain the youth them and the man them all throughout the UK, but none other than Jim Legxacy and his project called Black British Music, which released July 18, 2025. This one didn't have any notable first week sales. It didn't make any notable Billboard charts, although it did make it was number 29 on the UK albums chart for whatever that's worth. But that's not even why I believe this is an overrated project. For me, me, it's more about the fact that while it received a lot of universal acclaim, I'll give him that. Metacritic, which is one of the highly touted ratings platforms out there, they gave it a 90 out of 100, which is absolutely insane. Now, granted, there are some great things that Jim Legxacy does from a genre blending standpoint. He blends a lot of Afro beats, UK drill, emo, dance. He has a lot of flavor in his music, and so shout out to Jim Legxacy. I actually think he's a really dope artist, but I think this album was highly overblown. I think it was raised up and put up on a pedestal because I do think in an era where there isn't a lot of innovation, people would like to prop up artists like Jim Legxacy. I mean, it did have songs like 3 Times featuring Dave. It did have the lead single, which was called Father, which I thought was pretty good. It had Stick. It also had songs like 06 Wayne Rooney. And so there were some bright moments and bright spots on this album, but I just feel like when we start talking about highlighting the underground and propping it up because there's a void in mainstream hip hop, I think this album kind of sets the mark for me, and it makes it highly suspect that even a platform like Rolling Stone, who put out their top 25 hip hop albums of 2025 list, they had this as number 4, which I genuinely don't think that's accurate. Now, I can spend all video and say, man, let me go ahead and list 1,500 albums that I think are better than this. I think that would be cap, but I definitely can list you 25 albums that are better than this. This is nowhere near number 4. So therefore, Jim Legxacy, while he's a dope artist, I definitely think this album was extremely overhyped for what the culture and these critics in particular prop this up to be. I mean, you guys let me know. Next, we gotta talk about Tyler, the Creator's album called Don't Tap the Glass, was dropped July 21st, 2025, and it sold 128K first week units. It also debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 charts. This was a surprise release, and I remember being on Twitter one day and he just put up a date. Everyone was going crazy. I thought it was a dope moment for Tyler. Tyler's one of them guys that is unpredictable, and this album shouldn't be described as none other than that. And so it had popular songs like Ring Ring Ring, Sugar on My Tongue, and Sucker Free, like I mentioned before, and a slew of others. It was a 10-track project, definitely had a lot of retro feels. It definitely was a more dance, upbeat vibe, which is the complete opposite of what Tyler can give you if he really got into his rapidy rap, introspective, lyrical bag, but he didn't give us that on this project. And from that perspective, I like the project. Okay, guys, I like it. I just think it's overrated. And I was saying it when it dropped. I said it still to this day, and that's why it makes my list. I genuinely feel like Tyler gets credit for him being this artistic genius that he is. I feel like there's certain artists that drop and the culture refuses to ever fully critique it properly, even if they don't think the album is that amazing. And I think Tyler's one of those guys. And yes, that's probably a positive. You do kind of earn that credit from fans. You know, I think Kendrick is one of them guys that people refuse to critique musically because not everything he drops is perfect. But this album in particular from Tyler, the Creator, to me, it was just a bit too hype in my opinion. I think that his previous project called Chromacopia definitely was a bit more diverse musically. It was way better composed. The production was much better. I thought the storytelling was much better. Like, it was just a much better album overall. And it is no coincidence, rather, that even the Grammys recognizes that because he is on the list for nominees at the upcoming Grammy Awards and not the Don't Tap the Glass project. Now, I'm not somebody who puts too much stock into what the Grammys do, but I do think that's really interesting that the Grammy board kind of skipped over an album that Tyler put out after Chromacopia, but I digress. Tyler definitely is on my most overrated albums of 2025 with his Don't Tap the Glass project. Next, we gotta talk about NBA YoungBoy, also known as YoungBoy Never Broke Again, which, by the way, nobody calls him that. I don't know why people have him listed as that on Spotify. Let's go holla at Trump. He gave him a pardon. Can he pardon YoungBoy's name on Spotify to be listed properly? I would love that. I'm sure he would too. But YoungBoy released a project called Make America Slime Again, also known as Massa, on July 25th, 2025. The album sold 49K first week album sales. It also debuted at number 6 on the Billboard 200 charts. And quite frankly, this album was a typical YoungBoy album. And what I mean by that is he's gonna have a couple of songs on the project that are cool. Might have 1 or 2 that really go hard. But for the most part, this album had a ton of throwaways. Now, that probably sounds ridiculous for folks who love YoungBoy's music. As a matter of fact, I'm a believer in YoungBoy's talent. Go check out the video I put out earlier in this year, well, a couple months ago, I should say, to be more specific, where I was talking about YoungBoy don't make great music just yet. He has so much more in his arsenal that he hasn't shown the world. So I'm a believer in YoungBoy. I believe in YoungBoy's talent. But the music on this album album or the music, if he was from Memphis, just isn't good enough. It's not good enough to me. It did have songs like Shot Callin', which I know was a smash hit, especially after he went on tour. I know that song really went up on TikTok and so many other platforms. It had songs like Wine and Dine, it had Kickboxer, and a slew of other singles that I know folks really rock with, but I genuinely don't feel like this album is any special than any mixtape or project that he's put out more recently. And what I also want to figure out is how come YoungBoy doesn't get criticized for his low album sale? For somebody that's shown he's a cultural mover, he's a culture builder, he's a guy that hip hop really champions. Well, I guess if your name is not NLE the Great or NLE Choppa, you would probably agree with that. But like, why is it that YoungBoy doesn't get sort of clowned for that? I think that's really interesting. If anything, that's probably a highlight and a badge of honor for YoungBoy, but I don't feel like this project did anything special for YoungBoy outside of his tour being named Massa. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to go to the extent of saying his tour was more of a success than the actual music on the album.
You just made history. Top 10 U.S. rap tour, the highest grossing tour in the country. This man did it. Top 10.
Like, don't get it twisted. I'm here for everything YoungBoy does from an elevation standpoint. I want him to get to the next level. But y'all can't sit here and tell me that the album was better than the tour that dropped after the album. Think about that for a sec. And YoungBoy fans, don't come for me in the comments unless you want to really argue. I'm with the smoke too. But I just genuinely feel like this was a very overrated album from YoungBoy. Not the tour, not the artist. I don't think YoungBoy is an overrated artist. I think the album itself was a bit overblown. So that's why it makes my list. And lastly, we gotta talk about JID, also known as Jid, and his project he put out called God Does Like Ugly, which is really interesting because I thought God don't like ugly. That's neither here nor there. This album came out August 8, 2025. It sold 34K first week units. It peaked at number 11 on the Billboard 200 charts. This was his fourth studio album. It featured artists like Clips, Westside Gunn, Sierra, Ty Dolla $ign, and so much more. Y'all know JID is lyrical, miracle, spiritual artistry, and this album was no different. And so if you came to this album expecting that, I think you got what you came for. If you came to this album expecting better than what he had put out previously, well, I think you might have been a bit disappointed, dare I say. Before I get into my thoughts, I mean, it did have songs like Work, which was the lead single, You Ugly, featuring Westside Gunn. It also had songs like Community, featuring Clips. Again, these are really strong songs in my opinion, but you trying to tell me that this album is better than the Forever Story, the Never Story? Because I don't think so. If anything, I think this album is ambitious. It really achieves, I think, a great branding moment for JID, but musically, I don't think this album conceptually meets the mark of some of his previous work. And dare I say, JID was once propped up on a pedestal as the next guy in hip hop, the next leader in hip hop, or at least one of them. And I don't feel like he's ever truly lived up to that. Now, that probably is irrelevant if you're like, bro, just stick to the album. What do you think about the album? Well, look, I think this album isn't Grammy nominee worthy. I don't think that this is something that should have been on the rap album of the year list. And that's no hate to JID. I rock with him. I think he's a very dope artist. I just feel like the technical rapping, that label of being too lyrical and lyrically dense always follows JID and all the rappers who follow in that overly lyrical lane where critics give it a bit too much credence. And so I beg people, like, what are some quotables that you've picked up on from this project? What are some moments that you genuinely feel is rap album of the year worthy? And I know some people are gonna be like, bro, you crazy, bro. This album is fire. Like, this album fire. But like, genuinely speaking, I think people put too much credence in this project. And that's why it makes my top 5 most overrated albums in hip hop for 2025. But what do you guys think? Do you think some of the albums that I have in my list are overrated? Or am I tripping and I don't know hip hop like I claim I do? Listen, I'm not shy about it. If you want to destroy my list, feel free, but don't just disagree for the sake of engagement in the comments. Y'all let me know your thoughts down below. Once again, my name is Uche. I'll see you in the next video and in the new year. Peace.